Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, sponsored by the National Health Association. My special guest today is Brittany Jaroudi, who has a pretty extensive background in education, teaches in middle school. She's had a fine arts degree and a master's degree in art and education. And she is the founder and driving force of the Jaroudi family website and YouTube video channel that really takes a very active role in helping people make an incredible transition to plant-based living. And she's also recently one of the more recent members of the board of directors of the National Health Association. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education. So I'm so pleased. Welcome, Brittany. Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. As we go into this, people's stories of how they have that aha moment that kind of triggered, their journey into this. And a lot of times it happens with personal health issues. But I know in your case, it also happened with some major family health issues that you had to watch and, in a way, caretake, even at a very early stage and age of your life. So why don't you go into letting us get a little insight as to your journey, how that began, what the motivating factors were for that?
Yeah, so I grew up with parents that were pretty ill. My mom had battled cancer when she was in her childhood. She had bone cancer and became an amputee. And then when I was in fifth grade, she got diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And so she was very ill. And I remember one Easter, they told us that she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was very young. So didn't quite grasp the whole thing besides her being very ill. And then at Christmas around the same year, my dad had a heart attack and had to have a triple bypass surgery. So we kind of went through, one parent being pretty ill. And then when they kind of recovered, my other parent was ill for different reasons, but both heart disease and cancer run in my family pretty rampant.
And how old were you at that time when that was all happening?
It was between, I would say, 4th and 6th grade.
Oh my God.
And it kind of continued on through college.
And at that time, you were also, if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, you were also starting to deal with your own health issues with weight and things of that nature. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so you can pretty much see it's now interesting to go back and reflect of when they got sick and kind of the weight kind of starting to pile on. But I've struggled with weight issues pretty much since 2nd grade on. I'm very short. I'm only 4'11". So as soon as I have a little bit of weight on me, it's really noticeable. So just kind of always being in the overweight to obese category when I'd go to my doctor. And even I remember some earlier conversations with our pediatrician and them talking about, her cholesterol is at the high end and different things like that I didn't really raise a red flag then, but definitely now it's like, okay, how long have I been dealing with this for?
And so where was the aha moment where it became a plant-based direction? Talk about that.
Yeah. So when I got married, we got on my husband's health insurance, and they kind of give you a discount to get your blood taken. And they did a couple of tests that I never had heard before. And one was a C-reactive protein test, and mine got flagged high, but it came back as a 16, and under 3 is normal. And so not only was I already dealing with like high blood pressure issues from my doctor and then putting me on 2 different medications and high cholesterol talking about a statin, but then I had this C-reactive protein, which was really alarming as I went to Google and, pretty much an indicator of inflammation and possibly, developing heart disease and cancer. So those were 2 things I wanted to avoid. And so really shortly after getting that test done, I was flipping through Netflix and came across Forks Over Knives. And in that documentary, they talk about they have the producer go through his blood tests and they check his C-reactive protein and they check his blood pressure and all of that. And his numbers were so much better than mine. I think his was an 8 for his C-reactive protein. And I was so mad. Mine was 16. But I thought like, hey, if he got great results, why can't I do it? So we literally went plant-based the next day. It was the day before Easter. So I showed up at my family who, does the whole ham spread on Easter and pretty much just poked my way around the vegetables and really dove into the research from there.
Well, because you had been eating a very different way up until that point, when you made that transition, did you find the need to use some of the transition foods that are a little more processed, or did you cut that out completely? What was your transition like for you?
My transition was pretty much diving into Dr. Esselstyn's Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease book, Dr. Greger's How Not to Die book, Dr. Campbell's China study. And pretty much I didn't really use any of the transition foods because my goal was to, I didn't expect it to happen overnight, but I wanted to heal my body. And so throughout learning about it, I realized that, processed foods were not great, just like animal-based foods. And so it really was kind of like a clear draw in the sand that I wasn't going to have either or. So I really stuck to the whole food plant-based lifestyle.
And you have children, right? How many children do you have?
No children yet.
Oh, no children yet. Yes. Yeah. I raised 5 kids. And so what happens is when you deal with some of the peer pressures of that, so sometimes some of those transition foods have a place where they will feel like they're not being deprived. In all the years of counseling people, it's funny. I've yet to find anybody who loves deprivation. In fact, when you try to take stuff away, there's almost a part of your brain where you want to do that just because someone's telling you not to. So with kids, sometimes that is an issue. Now, I know you work in education, so you're working with children. You work on a middle school and grammar school level. What level do you work at?
Yeah, when I started my plant-based journey, I was kindergarten through 8th grade. So I saw a little bit of every grade. And then now I'm dealing with 7th and 8th grade mainly. So now just middle school. But, I do sprinkle in. It's funny. Some kids will like Google their teachers' names and, there I come up. And it's always fun to kind of be like, oh, yeah, I do this cooking show on the side. But I also run cooking club at my school. So anytime I teach a cooking club session, I always try to sprinkle in, like, I may not tell them like this is whole food plant-based, SOS free, but I always just say, this is allergy friendly and sprinkle in little things that maybe they haven't tried before.
Do you find that the parents of those children are receptive when you teach it that way? I mean, how do you find that?
Yeah, so many kids have allergies, and so it's really fun to just be creative. And I think the students just love cooking club in general and getting into the kitchen and learning. So so far the feedback has been really great. This is my 4th year of running that club.
Well, in that club, so you have a kitchen that's at the school. Is that what it is? You go into a kitchen there?
So I teach for a virtual school. So it's all behind the
So it's out of your kitchen. It's your kitchen where you're doing all that prep.
Kitchen, okay. Yeah. But they always send us photos, and it's very similar to Zoom and everything else where kids can get on the camera and show. So it's really fun that they're all in their own kitchen with their families and kind of working with what they have access to.
So you do your art education that way too, then online, basically. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And I was doing it way before the pandemic.
Right. Okay. So that was something that you already were in gear with. So that wasn't strange when the pandemic hit, basically. So let's go from there. So now you get really turned on. You really love the whole idea. You love cooking and food prep. Talk about the evolution of the Jaroudi family TV channel. What happens with all of that? How does that go?
Yeah. So really before being plant-based, I was always a creative person being in art, but I never really was much of a cook. Beginning of my marriage, I would buy all of the instant like sauce packets that you just jump on whatever, and dinner was done in like 5 minutes. And so when I went plant-based and I really started to educate myself, I found that I loved pretty much taking recipes that we've had before whole food plant-based and figuring out ways of, adding beans in instead of a meat, and playing around with all the different flavors. So really it just became just a different form of art for me. And so, I thought, my goal was that the whole food plant-based lifestyle gave me so much of my life back, and I wanted just to help someone else if I could. So really that was kind of the inspiration of starting to make recipes and share it.
So what were the influences for you for the shifting into those recipes? What kind of floats your boat? What turns you on? What did you focus on or look into or look at as you were, creating your outcome?
Yeah, it was like family recipes. So I would go through like my mom's recipe box and pull out, for example, for Christmas coming up, we always had like a mushroom soup. That's Slovenian for my family. And, seeing my grandmother make it is definitely not the healthiest. And there's a whole lot of things that aren't whole food plant-based in it. But figuring out ways of like making swaps and still keeping the flavor and I still make it every Christmas Eve for my family. And so it's really fun to do different things like that, keeping, I think, traditions alive that don't necessarily have to go away with being whole food plant-based. It's not giving up anything. It's just altering things to fit, my lifestyle.
Right.
And also then you feel so much better.
It's so interesting you say that, because when my children were small, my ex-wife, and we're good friends, she grew up in a family of Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
So while she didn't practice that, she had a whole arsenal of recipes in that tradition. The only women she ever knew were 60 and 70-year vegetarians, her aunts, her grandmother. So
Wow.
It was the same kind of thing, taking those recipes that may have a little dairy or something in it and just very gently modifying them to be completely vegan and whole food plant-based. But it was really cool keeping, as you say, those traditions alive. And I think sometimes we really should hold on to those, because some of those ancient traditions have been doing plant-based prep or using a lot of plant-based prep for generations. So why necessarily reinvent the wheel? You have something that you can kind of, lean on and utilize for that purpose, like you've done.
Yeah, I find that there's very few recipes that can't be transitioned and to be altered a little bit that you can still keep. I think the biggest thing I hear when people come to this and start is that they feel like they're giving up so much, or they kind of panic. And, that was my goal, is to make, foods that they are familiar, that the entire family will like. It's for me personally, it was starting this lifestyle. And then, my husband came on about 6 months later, but it was, making food that tastes good, that is healthy. And so, if you could show up and kind of share it with your family and friends, they're more inclined to be more open to it as well.
Well, since we're talking about the Jaroudi family, let's talk about him. So in terms of his transition, you're transitioning a certain way.
Yeah.
So he wasn't quite on board yet where you were, and he came on a little bit later.
I was lucky that I was really the meat lover of the two of us. He grew up in a Lebanese family, so he was already introduced to dates and lentils where I was not. So some of the things weren't as unfamiliar to him. And, his big thing was dairy. So it just took a little bit of time, but mainly I was the cook in the house. So he just ate what I made and enjoyed it. And, the longer he got away from, maybe not having a cheese pizza, he then didn't feel so great when he had it. So it really, for me, was a pretty easy transition for him.
Yeah, so there wasn't a lot of relationship stress about all of that. It was pretty much smooth transition. Did he have any health issues that he resolved doing that, or was that something not important for him?
He didn't have any health issues. We were around 26 when I started this. But he did notice a couple of things, like his allergies, seasonal allergies disappeared, which was pretty amazing, because he was taking Zyrtec a couple of times. His allergies were really bad here in Pittsburgh. And then his cholesterol also, he was kind of on the higher end, and it went down to a beautiful number. So those are pretty much the two main things. But luckily he didn't have anything, and he's never struggled with his weight.
So he got a bonus from just doing that, which is great. Yeah, and we know, I mean, eating and living this way so dramatically reduces inflammation across the board. Right. That people that suffer with pain, and inflammation is really the foundation for most of the chronic diseases of humanity, truthfully. And people, they just kind of live with that pain and discomfort, as you brought up CRP and other things. And so dramatically, this way of eating and living reverses that. It's just a shame that people just don't have a sense of how much they don't have to live in that kind of discomfort and pain. And so, what we're doing and what you're doing is so important for teaching people at a grassroots level. So, I'm here with Brittany Jaroudi. We're going to take just a short break to hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association. And now, to put a smile on the sponsors of the National Health Association, you're listening to the Health Science Podcast Show. I want to remind you to visit the National Health Association website, where you'll find incredible resources to support your healthy lifestyle, including plant-exclusive eating without added salt, oil, and sugar. Simply go to healthscience.org or nationalhealthassociation.org. Be sure to check out membership, which is $35 per year for those living within the U.S. and $55 for those living outside the U.S. You'll be amazed at all the information and benefits you'll receive. As a member, you're kept up to date on the latest evidence-based tools for health promotion. You'll receive the incomparable quarterly magazine Health Science, a beautiful 40-page advertising-free publication mailed to your home or offices, loaded with articles, recipes, inspirational stories, and interviews with world leaders in the fields of personal health, plant-based nutrition, water-only fasting, animal rights, and environmental support. And you'll receive details about life-changing events, such as the 2023 NHA Conference set for June 23 to the 25th, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio, which will be the NHA's 75th annual NHA Conference. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and now back to the show. Welcome back. I'm here with Brittany Jaroudi. We're discussing all things vegan and cooking and making transitions and all of those wonderful things. Tell me about how the YouTube channel has evolved from the beginning to where it is now, how it attracts people, who it attracts, how you do it. Give us a little bit of idea of how that all operates and works for you.
I just really wanted to be in people's houses and kind of take them along step by step. I'm such a visual learner that I think, sometimes, and at this point now, it's so easy for me to kind of think on the fly in the kitchen and make recipes, obviously, but it's so nice to be like with somebody as they're doing it. So really, I just wanted to be like a friendly face that can walk you through something easy and simple and not make it overwhelming. And it started really way back. It started with me kind of going through cookbooks and just kind of sharing, that it wasn't overwhelming, kind of looking at something from scratch and just going for it. And then it devolved into me making my own recipes. And it's just been so fun to like build a community. And, everyone, I feel like I recognize people from our Facebook group and social media accounts that we're all like such good friends now. And it's been such a great blessing.
So your focus group is expanding as people come into this dance, into your kitchen, bringing people into your kitchen. I love that idea. It's such a great idea that you're just kind of embracing people. That's one of the benefits of this whole virtual world, that we can do those kinds of things, As that grows and the focus groups grow, do you do any outreach other than online? Do you go other places? Do you do anything in that regard in the communities locally or anything like that?
I do. I help run Plant-Based Pittsburgh, which is a plant pure pod here in our city, and I actually help co-lead it. So we have tons of outreach. We do monthly meetings in person and online, and it's just been great. I found that group by literally looking through a newspaper one day and found it 6 minutes from my house. There was a plant-based group, and I couldn't believe it that there was a group of people doing exactly what I was doing so close. And so I've become such great friends with all of the ladies that run it with me. And we do potlucks and educational classes. And we've done a couple different like food drive events for plant-based meals to give out. And that's been really fun to incorporate into our community as well.
When people divvy up their time, how much time do you spend actually teaching art? And how much time do you actually spend working on all of these other beautiful things that you're doing?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I would say 40 plus hours for both. But it's just a passion of mine. So if I didn't love what I did for either, it would be overwhelming. And I have such a passion for both loves. And so it doesn't really feel like work.
It's a passion project for sure. Now, we know there's other factors of life that are important, physical activity, things of that nature. How do you integrate that in the kinds of things you do? I know there's people that probably feel like, oh my God, just listening to her, I'm getting tired, just listening to all these things she's doing. So how do you integrate these other things? And do you have time for activity? Do you have time for other social events? How do you integrate your life around these things? Talk about that.
Well, definitely. It's all kind of intertwined. Stress and exercising are definitely just as important as, what I'm cooking for meals. So I actually I take after Dr. Greger, and I have a walking treadmill desk that I luckily can work from home. And so while I'm grading and doing things and meetings, I walk every day. And then also, we love to be active together, my husband and I. So, on the weekends and in evenings when it's not snowing here in Pittsburgh, we're always kind of out moving and doing something. So definitely that, and quality time and meditation and all of that. I definitely try to make those priorities.
So he's working at a regular job that he goes to. Is that how it works for him?
Right now he has a couple of days where he can work from home and a couple of days he goes in. So right now it's a little flexible.
So that's cool. So let me ask you another thing, because I know that you came on as on the board of directors for the NHA. Tell me your journey to the NHA. How did that occur? How did you find them? How did you integrate into that group?
So I was lucky to be at a plant-based Pittsburgh event that Mark and Wanda Huberman were at, and we just kind of hit it off. And we also have some close friends here in Pittsburgh, mutual friends that we met, and just kind of, I fell in love with the NHA, and I think Mark and Wanda fell in love with me. So it's just been so nice to kind of to be a part of it, to be a speaker at the conferences, and I just adore. We actually have a board meeting tonight after this. So,
you do? Okay.
So it's just been so fun to be a part of it, to help out with Health Science magazine, and just to help promote it. The conferences are so fantastic.
Are you familiar with the old history of the organization? Do you really know about it?
I do. I've had many talks with Mark about it, and I love their website, because you actually can go back and look at the original.
I know, it's amazing to see that.
Lots of old pictures that I just love. I mean, I could spend hours.
The fact that it's bordering on its 75th anniversary is pretty amazing. I'm here with Brittany Jaroudi from the Jaroudi family YouTube channel and website, and let our listeners know how they can find you. Where do they go? What's the websites and locations that they can find you the easiest?
So pretty much, if you just go to Google and you Google the Jaroudi family, I'll pop up. Our YouTube channel is at the Jaroudi family. Our website, we're transitioning from an old website to a new website to make it a little easier. But literally, if you just Google the Jaroudi family, I will come up on Facebook and everywhere.
Okay. Many times when people get involved in this lifestyle, they start off with personal health issues, but they realize that personal health fits into a much bigger context, in the sense that we have concerns about, animals around us, the environment itself. How do you establish your mindset in relationship to those other pieces? And do you have any activism or any connection with any groups in your work that focus on those issues?
Yeah, so I love that it's all interrelated, that everything helps each other. So it definitely is, when I started this, it was for health reasons. But as I've learned, about all the different issues, it definitely makes me feel good to be a part of something that isn't contributing negatively to animals and, climate and different things. So I definitely try to be conscious with buying plastic and environmental issues. And, I help always try to support Vegan Pittsburgh, which is our local vegan group here as well. So those are two little ways that I always try to make sure I support their events and attend those as well.
How have you seen things evolve? Different cities and even different states and even different countries. I do a lot of travel, and I've seen this explosion of kind of veganism and this consciousness of, all of that expanding. How has it evolved in Pittsburgh? What's your take on how it's been there?
I mean, I think I've only been doing this this is my 6th year of doing it. And even in those 6 years, it has been so extreme for even going to the grocery stores. Now there's a whole plant-based section. So I just think it's definitely starting to pick up a little bit more. I think more doctors are starting to become a little bit more educated in that, and you're hearing health benefits to it. I feel like if you go to the doctors now and you say plant-based, it's a positive reaction versus maybe before. So I think even in a short amount of time, for me, it's even going to the grocery store and not just seeing, one option. There's lots of different plant-based options when we head out now, even to like our local one down the street.
Do you have a physician in Pittsburgh or doctors in Pittsburgh that you can rely on for counseling, or do you reach outside of that?
We actually have a bunch of plant-based doctors here in Pittsburgh. We have a plant-based endocrinologist. We have a plant-based family pediatrician and family doctor. So we're really lucky here in Pittsburgh. We have a couple American Lifestyle Board physicians that have really stepped up and have created even their own practices that they have broken away from the big hospitals and kind of have started private practices to promote this. So I'm very lucky here in Pittsburgh that we have a group that's growing even more.
You know, with your early history of dealing with kind of a childhood obesity or teenage obesity, I would imagine that you would be very sensitive to that within our population. When you think about the fact that, you know, the most rapidly growing group of fat people, and over the last 30 years, have been children under the age of 18. With your past experience and the things you're doing now, besides what you do with the school, do you take any other steps to really try to look at that and address that in a more powerful and direct way?
I always try to make people conscious, especially when I do cooking classes in our community, that, you know, it starts at home. The reason why I started the Jaroudi family as our name was for my family to help your family get healthy, because I came from such an unhealthy family, which, you know, has had detrimental losses and everything else. So I really kind of express that, you know, if you're cooking with your grandkids or you have your kids around, to get them involved, have them cook with you so that they're more interested in trying the things. And so I really hope that you know, my demographic is sometimes a little bit of an older crowd, but I also hope that I'm reaching some younger families as well doing this. You
know, raising 5 kids, I always tell people, if you have children and they either cook it, if they make it or grow it, they'll usually eat it. And so, you know, I've got them, my kids early on were in the kitchen. Now they're grown up and they're all independently incredible food prep people. And one of them is a very internationally well-known vegan chef. So, you know, it's interesting because they, you know, you can turn them on, and turning kids on by having them do it and touch it and play with it and being very tactile with it is such an important thing. And it's something that is really a wave of what we need to do for the future. What's the favorite stuff that you like to make? Tell me some of the things you really love making. I'm always making something new, but specifically, we just got over Thanksgiving here. So all the Thanksgiving foods were so fun to make. We made like a lentil loaf. We made Brussels sprouts that were glazed, mashed potatoes. We make a harvest salad that's really fun. And so I just love being creative. So anything that I can kind of try out new to kind of test my abilities of making it whole food plant-based, I'm in for. That's great. That's beautiful. So where do you see you going with what you're doing? Tell me, you know, what your vision is for an immediate or a distant future in terms of plans and ideas that you're fermenting and getting on in play. Tell me a little bit about how you see the future for you and the work you're doing. Yeah, so we're definitely planning on having a family, so that'll be exciting. Hopefully in the next little bit here, and you know, to reach more younger families for sure is a goal of mine. But I hope just to kind of keep doing what I'm doing. I love cooking. If I can just keep helping people, that's very gratifying for me. So I would love just to reach more people and share more and to be of service to others. If you think you're busy now, wait, I know. Wait till those little guys come. I know. Then you got to do it without sleeping. See, that's the other trick. And you'll get there. You'll learn that. You know what I'm saying? So let me ask you a question. As we kind of wind this down a little bit for people, do you have any final words or words of advice or something that you would really love to share with our guests out here? I think don't get discouraged. I know when I got my blood results back, you know, after doing it for a little bit of time, they weren't perfect. They came down, but they weren't, you know,
they weren't like the forks over knives guy who, he's came back after 30 days and it was, great. Mine definitely took a while to come down. They all came down and they're all amazing now after doing it for a while. But I always like to remind people is that, usually it took you a while to get to the point that you're at now. It didn't happen overnight. And to reverse it, it doesn't usually happen overnight either. And just to kind of keep believing and trusting and you'll get there. So
we're such a fast,
we love instant.
We're such a fast fix, quick fix culture, even with the way things are on the internet and all of that. People lose sight that there's a time factor for recovery, just the way there's been a time factor for something to develop. So your point is so well made for people to realize that, there's going to be a bit of a time factor. But the truth is, if you look at, say, something that's developed over the last 10 to 20 years, and it remarkably and dramatically changes in a year or two, think about that. That's a remarkable return on your investment. And by embracing, this beautiful, having fun with the colors and flavors and textures and all this artistry of plant-based cooking and plant-based food prep, and just enjoying the dynamics and the viability and the vitality from that in itself is a reward. And your point is so well made. People need to have a little patience for the time factor of recovery. And that's really, really important. Well, I want to really thank you so much for taking the time today and sharing your words of wisdom with our audience. I totally encourage you to follow the Jaroudi family online with Brittany Jaroudi. Get some really incredibly tasty and, incredible ways to do some food prep. Get turned on to plant-based cooking. There's nothing like it. It's one of the most exciting things that you can possibly do. And I especially want to thank our listeners. Without you, we can't do any of this. And I want to thank you for being part of this incredibly active NHA community. And I want to thank you on behalf of the National Health Association. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I really look forward to seeing you at our next show. Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.